WANYONYI, MP, Westlands constituency. We're talking about the cost of living in the country. What next for Kenyans? What should we expect? What should we do? And what should we expect from government to facilitate a return to normal CCT?
The constituency that you have been the leader of for now, is it going to beyond 3 decades? Mm-hmm. Would you say that the majority of the people in your constituency are poor?
I'll confidently say that.
Yes. Now, there is a government program that we have read about. It was in the Kibaki government, Uhuru government, where people who are poor or living below the poverty line are given direct cash injection. Some who are elderly are also given direct cash injection. Now, this is a two-tiered question. So let me ask the first one. That money that has been set aside, just talking about helping people who are unable to fend for themselves, have you seen it working in your constituency? Money that's given to these vulnerable groups, have you seen it working? And is it consistent?
Well, the money, I'll say the transfer of that money has been a big issue because they will send once, then they fail to send for the next 3, 4, 5 months. Then they send again. And you remember, they're only sending something like 2,000. And also the way they identified, we were asked, even we participated in identifying these vulnerable people. And we gave out their names. I think the weak link in that system is the system where they're using the chiefs and on that. And along the way, people create a different list, which now is directed to the ministry. And you find the people who are receiving that money, they don't exist. Many of them don't exist. And if you just go to that village and randomly ask how many people receive this cash transfer from the government, you will hardly find somebody who is receiving that money. A few who have received. I know a few. I can go in the village, I can pinpoint, and I know them. But majority don't receive that money at all. Yeah.
And
that is a skewed way, and we have asked the PS so many times so that they can refine this. And likely, in this current budget that we are making now, we have asked them now to come up with a better system than the one that was there before, because that one was not actually working. It was not working at all.
So at what point is this manipulated? Is it at the point of registration? Who's supposed to do this? These are social workers working for the State Department for Social Protection, isn't it?
The registration part, and then the money, if we follow the flow of that money, Treasury releases the money to the ministry. The ministry releases the money to the next level, to the DCC or something like that. The DCC releases the money to the chiefs. Now, that is where the problem starts. The chiefs now are the one who mess up that transfer of the money. Because from the chiefs, we are saying, why can't, even at the DCC or at the bank, whichever the bank is the recipient, why can't we just have a system of M-Pesa transfer or whatever?
Directly to the recipient.
Direct to that person than calling you to work. Some of those people cannot even walk, to go to the DCC to go and receive the money.
Why is that system in place? Well, the other one for the elderly, the Inua Jamii, they receive the money directly into their bank accounts.
Or M-Pesa.
To M-Pesa. We are thinking M-Pesa is a better way, because at least even if he doesn't have an M-Pesa, there's somebody
that they nominate and say.
A caregiver or something must be having the number that they can send the money to. And that is, I think, is a better way, is more convenient, and it can, I think, works much better.
Are you able to do a survey in your constituency, for example, and say the people who are deserving of receiving this money who are not receiving? And then you present that and say, for example, in my constituency, these people fall into the category of the people who should be recipients and beneficiaries of this program, and they are not. And then you use that to pose questions directly to the ministry.
I have done that because the people who have come to me and they show that their names were taken. And all along, they have never received a cent. And we prepared this list and took it to the PS then in the Ministry of Labour. Was Maru, I think. And he said he was going to take up that matter with the people on the ground and solve the problem. Until we went to election, that thing had been done.
He was still taking care of the matter.
He was still solving that problem, I believe. You see, sometimes the government can be very, very, very slow.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's just bureaucracy. You go there, somebody who sits, he has files on the desk. He doesn't work on them. He sits on them until last minute, like they wait during the cycle of budget making. These guys wait until June when they're saying now they are closing that financial year. Then they start looking for people. We are paying. How much are we paying? We are paying. And that's how the money starts disappearing. Because they find guys who they owe the money, but they have been holding his money for so long. And sometimes, when the government releases the money, you must spend it before the expire of that. So if you don't spend it, they must find a way. That money either goes back to Treasury or you have to spend it.
The reason why I was asking this question, Mheshimiwa, is because when you mentioned India, it sparked a thought in my mind as to how some of the states in India experimented with this, the concept. Now, it's a concept that is referred to in the US as food stamps, meaning instead of perhaps or in addition to the money that someone gets, you are given, it's like a credit note, something you can go to a certain shop and ensure that you get certain goods. It's better than a promissory note.
Yes.
Do you think that a system of that sort, in addition to the cash, because the cash transfer is necessary, it's important for someone to actually have cash, but it's also important for someone to eat, because some people will get the money and they will not buy food with it. So if it was complemented, these things we talk about, subsidiaries and subsidies and what have you. If a system of that sort was introduced, I'm talking about in its purity, not in the convoluted form these systems of ours take. Do you think, especially if you're talking about an urban center with the number of people who are living below the poverty line, would this assist?
It will be the better system, by the way. If we come up with a system like that and people have given that, what you are calling a credit note, he just comes and shows that thing and he'll be given the ration that he receives from the shop. And there are particular shops which are identified that are the ones which will now be the one dealing with that kind of thing. Because you can't have everybody there. No. They must identify these shops and they must make sure that these shops have enough supplies to serve these people. And that works very well.
You see, if you look traditionally, a system that existed, it just wasn't called what we're calling this one. But for instance, if you had a bumper harvest and you were able to keep it in storage, your relatives and people known to you who may not have had a bumper harvest knew they could come to you. And you would give them. And the understanding was that in times of need, if you needed and they had a bumper crop, they could give it to you. So this issue of food security, traditionally, there was a way in which it was sorted out.
Yeah. And it also gives people that dignity.
Yes.
It doesn't bring you that demeaning that you actually are beggar. It just creates that system that you go there and this is how you are supposed to be served because of ABCD.
Sure.
It just keeps your dignity.
So we're essentially saying that one of the solutions to this thing that we are, it's been here for some time, one of the solutions that we're saying is the institution of a welfare system in Kenya is probably a way of making sure that at any one time the citizens of the country are taken care of. Are we saying that must then be a formal... Well, the suggestion is that it could then be a formalized way of handling this, so that in the grand scheme of things, the welfare section of this is prioritized budget-wise. It's prioritized across government. Is that a possible solution to this?
Yes, it is a possible solution. And I remember I was talking to a former PS who was in the Kibaki government. And they say there were some people who had come up and created a system of this cash transfer and on like that. That's social protection. And then another group of people came in without knowing the background of this system and how these people have created this system, how it works. And they went and removed them without, So the system now got cropped up. That these guys who have come in, they have no idea how this thing was working. So you just come up and take off something that you did not create. You don't know the history behind it. So that thing failed. And that's where I think the rain started beating us. The system failed because somebody came in who was thoughtless and they just removed these people. Instead of, that's sometimes how things work. You come in with your own philosophy and you don't want to, sometimes you must have some continuity.
Yeah.
Somebody to help you, even your transit before you do something else. But if without that, you'll actually crop in a lot of problems. And that's what we're having in this current government.
Yeah.
They've walked in people who have never worked in the government, who have no experience. They have taken over places and they have no idea now. They're just issuing directives left, right, and center, and nothing is working. For 6 months, they're telling us, "Oh, give us more time. Oh, you do it." We can't wait forever. Yeah, and again, as a government, you cannot work in government, and the only thing you are doing is blaming the former government. A government is a government. When you take over, you solve the problems that were created by your predecessor and move on. Obama worked in an office that was bankrupt, literally bankrupt. He never blamed Bush. We never had him mentioning Bush all over the place. Kibaki did the same. He walked in, the government was so dilapidated. He never spent time talking about Moi. He went to work. And within time, he had turned things around. So a government must work in the office. It means unless you have no idea why you are in the government, you have in the government, you have to create wealth. That is the system. You have to create wealth for the government to move.
We had the CEO of the Kenya National Trading Corporation sitting exactly where you're sitting a while back, and we were having this discussion about some of the plans that this government has. This is me saying that they're reviving Kenya National Trading Corporation because in my mind it was dead. Now, one of the things that they've done is there are these imports that they've brought in, which we are told are duty-free. But in addition to the imports, the figures vary. They say they are designated or selected 200,000 shops, some say 500,000 shops, where these goods that are being brought in will be available to the WANYONYI at this so-called subsidized rate. Now, in theory, it sounds like the sort of plan that we are talking about. The details of how these shops were selected or how they will be created, that is really not there. I haven't come across those details anywhere. As for the details of the foodstuffs that will be available in these shops and whether these shops will only sell these particular items or others, again, that is also not clear. Now, where am I going with this? I am saying that there is the discussion about the foods that are being brought in and the availability of those very foods in the country. And there is no evidence to show that those foods in the country have been exhausted. Meaning, we don't have evidence to show that apart from the aid that is required, every foodstuff that was locally available has been exhausted or has been bought up. So now, if it's duty-free and it's brought in, there'll be this competition with what is already locally produced, and that isn't subsidized. So what has been going on in my mind is, how does this help the WANYONYI? Now, those of you who are in parliament, I'm sure you've heard of these issues and you have better details than we do. How are you people handling this matter?
The problem that is there is this. In other countries, for example, they protect the local producers. They protect the farmers. They say, how much do our farmers have? And then they make sure that whatever we are producing here, if the other food that is brought from out, must be more expensive than the ones that they produce locally. So it gives the consumers or the people time. They understand that I can go and buy the locally produced rice from where or from wherever, the maize, than go and buy the rice from Pakistan. It will be more expensive, even though it may look better, but it will be expensive. So it's a time that the government must have that policy. And this is a serious issue with the ministers who sit in the offices. They must look, the Minister for Agriculture, Minister for Trade, Minister for Finance, if they sit together with their PSS, they must come up with these things. So, but because it's not it doesn't just fall in one ministry, it falls across the board with all these ministries to understand the ration that they are going to apply. The locally produced and the imports, so that they don't make, because if you look at even COMESA, that is what they were saying. If you buy things from within the COMESA region, you must buy what you're just coming to top up what you have. And you cannot make maize from Tanzania or from Malawi to be cheaper than the maize from Kenya. The reason being that maybe their cost of production there is much cheaper than ours. And it comes here, is still cheaper. Sugar produced, for example, as we live on the border, our home is down there at the border with Uganda. The Tusker that is produced in Kenya, it's cheaper. You cross over, you go and drink in Uganda, it's cheaper in Uganda than it is in Kenya.
It's the same with Tanzania.
Yes. So you keep on asking, why? Why is petrol in Uganda cheaper than in Kenya, yet it has been moved from Mombasa all the way to Kampala?
Even as you say things, when you're looking at solutions as to why these things can be cheaper, in the last couple of days, you talked about sources for cheaper power. And if I quote what you said, as a country, we need to liberalize the power sector, invest in cheaper energy alternatives, and stop relying on hydroelectricity, which is very expensive, in order to reduce the cost of electricity in the country. We know that in the next few weeks, we are going to see, I think the number is 64% rise in electricity costs. For folks who are paying prepaid, postpaid, whatever it is, we're going to see that rise. But you think that there's a solution to this as well?
What we are looking is actually we want to liberalize that market. Kenya Power has had a monopoly for a long, long time. They're the sole producer, the sole supplier of electricity in this country. For example, if you produced electricity on your own, you can't sell it to me. You have to sell it to Kenya Power to sell it to me. It's ridiculous. Mumias Sugar, before it collapsed, Mumias used to produce 4 megawatts of electricity. They could not sell it to the locals in Mumias and download, because it will be cheaper for this factory. It could even be an SCSR and give it back to the community. We say, you have served us well, we are supplying you with electricity. This Kenya Power had to download that to the national grid, Kenya Power, to sell it to us. KenGen says they're the ones who sell power to Kenya Power. They sell it at, I think they're saying, is it 9 or 20 shillings. Kenya Power will sell to you at 56 shillings. The markup.
The same power.
Same power. The markup. Even if you want to make profit, surely, why can't you just make 10%, something like that, so that you allow somebody to breathe? They are, squeezing air out of you. And they want you, like these people who have factories here. How do you manage to manufacture and put your things on the market competitively when the cost of production is on the roof? So for us to do anything, we have to liberalize the market in the energy and bring in other players. And it will bring the cost down, the way we did with the mobile phones. You remember at the beginning when there was just
Kenya Post and Telecommunication.
Kenya Post and Telecommunication, and then we had when this mobile came in, Airtel. That time I don't know, it was called what?
It was still Telcom or something.
No.
Celtel.
It was called Celtel.
Celtel.
Yes.
No, the
Celtel,
first mobile
Safaricom.
before Safaricom was Telcom.
The ones with the size of a telephone booth. Yes.
And it was damn expensive. For you to, in fact, buying a gadget like this was a status symbol.
Yeah.
You only if you serve somebody with a mobile phone on the street, you have to follow to look at him. How does he look? And I remember when I bought my first mobile, and you used to be, it was, I think, prepaid. There was, so when you have put 10,000, when it reaches around 5,000, they start warning you. Please, we don't want to disconnect your phone. But you see how now the market is liberalized. You can call with a shilling.
So what you're saying is that who says we can't do the same thing with electricity?
Yes, we can liberalize the market with electricity, and the people can produce. We can produce it through affordable means like solar, wind. If you go to these other countries, they use wind, they use nuclear, they use other means of producing electricity much cheaper. Hydroelectricity is very, very expensive. And even one we are doing in Naivasha is even more expensive. So unless we find a cheap alternative, and they are available to us. We have, you see, those turbines that were set up in Marsabit or where. They're just standing there. We're not using them.
In Loyangalani.
Yes. They're not using them.
They are injecting about 120.
And they can give us cheaper and cleaner energy.
You know, there's an argument that is often preferred against liberalization contextually in a country such as ours. They say it opens now doors for the worst possible things that you can look at. Let's look at the oil sector. We liberalized it. Now, depending on who is in power, does it then not open the door for that very liberalization to be turned around, instead of it being a portal from where competition can actually bring about the good forces of competition, where prices go down because people are competing, to a situation where you have an oligopoly. It's not as though there'll be one person, but there'll be a few people who actually control that whole thing. So, in essence, you will not actually have moved, but liberalization will have given them the opportunity. Look at the structural adjustment programs that the World Bank brought to us in the Moi era. Now, look at what it brought about. We are back again. We are hearing that we want to dispose of certain national assets, which we are told are not profiting. It has World Bank written all over it, the thinking. But look at how it's been approached. First of all, we are here. Cabinet is supposed to be able to make those decisions without what?
Parliament.
Authority. Now, it's an idea and an agenda that is being pushed. So I'm saying liberalization is a good thing. But in a context such as ours, how do you then prevent that nefarious door from being opened so that people take advantage of it to the great disadvantage of those who are supposed to actually benefit from it?
You know, government, when it's going to negotiate for certain things, even for facilities that they want to use, you must send your best negotiators who can go and bargain for the country. But if you go there and these guys who are forced to just collect solutions and come with them, you must go there when they tell you that you do this, you say that cannot work in our country. It will not work. Even if we say yes, it will not work. It will fail. And you bargain and put the alternative on the table. And you'll find a solution for that. Some countries have managed to do that. And it has worked for them. But sometimes we send there and people who just look like beggars, who have gone there and they're just already carrying the pole. Whatever you give us we shall be happy. That won't help for us. We want to see you send the best of the best. Look at which peers, which cabinet, and let me tell you, at this level, the technocrats are the people who are supposed to go and negotiate, not the politicians. Because the politician, you can be the head of that institution, but you don't have the knowledge, you don't have the know-how about how the institution works. These technocrats are the ones who are supposed to go there and negotiate for those things. So unless we do that, we'll always get it short. And I tell you, there's something called political culture. Every country is unique in its own way. Democracy in America cannot be the democracy in Kenya the same. It will not be the one in South Africa.
Or India.
Or wherever. What happens in India is their democracy, whatever they call it. And what happens here
should
is
be our democracy.
Our democracy.
Mheshimiwa, thank you for joining us today.
Yeah.
The Honorable WANYONYI is the MP for Westlands constituency. Keep it here for more conversations.
This is the Situation Room, the only way to start your day.